Okay, welcome. Today we're talking about area and circumference and reviewing a few things about circles. One of the key pieces when working with circles is your understanding of a diameter, which goes through the center of the circle from one edge to another, right? And that's your diameter here. So basically it goes from one side of the circle to the other through the center. Now, from that same center, if we drew a line, let me get a different color here. If I drew a line from the center to one side of the circle, we would call that the radius. And one thing you want to consider is the fact that, well, I went from center to edge twice here for a diameter. So that basically is telling us that two of these, will equal one of these, one diameter. So if I gave you a circle and said the diameter was 10, well then you could tell me the radius was 5. And if I gave you a circle and told you the radius was 4, well then you could tell me my diameter was 8. So basically two radiuses made up one diameter. And one diameter of 10 is basically made up of two radiuses of 5. Now, a couple key formulas that you should know, have memorized, put on an index card, very commonly used and on SAT, so on and so forth, is your area of pi r squared and your circumference of 2 pi r. Now both of these are actually shown at the beginning sections of SAT, but knowing these off the top of your head is very important. So let's just take a look at some of those. So let's first take a look at circumference. So right away let's look at circumference and a couple different ways that may be presented to you. Now what is circumference? Circumference is basically giving you the measure. If you started at one point of the circle and traveled around all the way to the other side of the circle, basically the perimeter of the circle. Circumference is very similar to the perimeter of that of a square. Now the problem or difference is that a perimeter is an adding up of sides, and since a circle does not have sides, we're adding or finding a calculation of the movement around a circle. Now, if you have a radius of 1 and we're to measure the circumference, 2 pi r, 2 times 1 times pi, you would get whatever 2 pi is, meaning you would get around the circle once, and you could do that in a calculator. There is a pi symbol, second pi, and you would get a value of 6.28. So basically, if I had a circle with a 1 foot radius, in order to travel around that circle, I would go about 6.28 feet. Now they may give you a circle which doesn't have a radius. Maybe they give you a circle with a diameter of 12, right? They tell you the diameter is 12. Well, quite simply, you understand that a diameter is 2 radius. So in order to, I know 2 radius equals a diameter. So 2 radius is equal to 12 divided by 2. So basically, anytime you get a radius, you divide that by 2, or you give a diameter, you divide that by 2, and you get a radius. So here my radius is 6. And now in order to solve for what my circumference is, I would do 2 times 6, or 12 pi. And if I put that in my calculator, 12 times 3.14, or 12 times pi, I would get 37.69. Now, understand what we did there. We took a radius of 12, we divided it by 2, and then went ahead and multiplied it back by 2. So in reality, we just we just multiplied by our diameter. So you could, as another formula, instead of doing 2 pi r, you could just, because you know 2 radiuses equal diameter, instead of doing 2 pi r, you could just do diameter times pi. And basically, it's the same equation because 2r equals diameter. So we could have just taken this circle with a diameter of 12 and just had done 12 pi, and we would have gotten the same answer. Now let's look at area. Now area is a little bit different. Remember when we did circumference, we were measuring around the circle. We were measuring the edge of the circle. Now when we're, you know what, I have to use another circle here. That's just not gonna cut it. So much better, maybe. So remember, circumference was measuring around the perimeter or the edge of the circle. Now when we're dealing with area, we're measuring what's on the inside of the circle. And in order to do that, we wanna basically, remember when we had the square, you did side squared. So you're kind of doing the same thing with a circle. Now, the only way to solve for areas with the radius, the diameter will not work because it'd be like you using the diagonal of the square. You kind of have to use the radius. So areas is pi r squared. So if I told you in a circle that your radius was, let's say 8, all you would do is take that radius, plug it into your equation, square it, meaning 8 times 8, and get a result of 64 pi. And you can put this in your calculator and calculate, you get some form of decimal answer. Now, a great question I like to show and finish with is this, just like we did with the triangles, what happens if we're given an area, and you could do the same with circumference, and I say, okay, my area is, let's say 81 pi, and they ask for the radius and they ask for the diameter. Well, I know that area is r squared pi. So what number squared gives me 81? Well, I could just simply take the square root of 81, and the square root of 81 is 9 times 9. So 9 squared is 81, so I know that 9 would be my radius. 9 would be my radius, and if I wanted my diameter, I could just multiply that by 2 and get a diameter of 18. So if they give me an area, I'm able to use this formula, take the square root of that area and get the radius and the diameter. And the same could be done if you were given the circumference and I said, okay, the circumference is 20 pi. And you say, okay, well, I know circumference is 2 pi r. So if circumference is equal to 20 pi, I could divide both sides by pi. I could get 2r, right? The pi's cancel out, is equal to 20. Divide by 2, and my radius, I could get 10. And by getting my radius, I could always get my diameter just by multiplying by 2 and get my diameter of 20. So here's a good fun example of when they give you a circumference or they give you an area. Now, if they give you it in decimal form, like if it says circumference is equal to 20.89, just make sure you divide by pi in that case, and you'll still work out to some answer there. Remember, practice and hard work makes all this math very easy.